What is going on, you guys? My name is Daniel and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going over when you should be purchasing the R6. Not so much as time, but situation. And I think that there's going to be a lot of new people coming into Canon and buying the R6 and the R5 because that is what their budget has, and they think that the body is more important than the lenses and they don't know what to do yet. So this is kind of for the new photographers and those people that are on the fence on if they should buy the R6. Should they go with the R5? Should they go with the R? Is the RP good enough? Should I go with the 6D? Should I go with, something else? So now, while the R6 is an awesome camera and it has a higher frame rate, awesome low light performance, and it has some wonderful overpriced features such as 120 frames a second in 1080p, things like that, 10-bit, and has wonderful overheating in 4K. We're going to go over into those things that it kind of has. It's like overkill. You don't need it because it's overkill for what you're doing, but it's like some people really want that Ferrari to just drive around the park and look cool. That's awesome. The R6 will do that for you. But if you want to get the most out of your hobby or what specific niche you're doing in photography, this video will help you kind of figure out if the R6 is for you. All right, and a plug for all of you new photographers down below. If you want to learn all the basics of how to get started and do proper exposures with mirrorless cameras, I have a course available for you down below. Times when I think that the R6 is not really the best camera for you is if you're a new YouTuber or just getting into it and don't know what you want to do, but you still want a mirrorless camera that's going to help you learn faster and still give you wonderful quality. This is going to be the M50. This is pretty much what I'm going to recommend for people who are going to want to do their travel vlogs, their travel family photography videos that they want, the home videos. Going with the M50 instead of the R6 is going to save you a ton of money, and it's going to do the exact same thing, and then you won't be paying a bunch of money for features that you're not going to be using, like 20 frames a second shooting with a silent shutter and then having 4K capabilities in 60 frames a second and 120 frames in 1080p. You won't be wasting money on features you're not using. The times that for these lower end people that are just getting in, the M50 is going to be perfectly fine. If you do want to get into the mirrorless world and you're looking to just do photography, I'm going to recommend, depending on the type of photography that you're doing, this is kind of a split thing. So if you're just doing the studio work in really slow, you get everything ready and you take the picture, then cool. The RP and the Canon R are wonderful cameras for just doing that. The R is a fantastic studio camera, even video, because the 1080p that it has and the 4K that you have in the R in the C-Log settings, they are really good, but you have to know how to use them, and so they're catered towards studios, whereas the R6 has much more leniency with its 10-bit, and I want to say that for the most part, the quality coming out of the R6 is much more forgiving if you mess up with your settings and how to do your lighting properly. The people who want to do just regular studio photography, buying anything under the R, starting at the R and below is a wonderful place. If you don't need to do any video work, I recommend the RP. Some people get caught up in the sensor size, but man, anything over like 16 megabytes is quite a bit for a sensor, and you can get wonderful prints and all that type of stuff. And the R does have a larger sensor than the R6 and the RP. However, it's like a give and take because, yes, while you do have more pixels, you do get more dynamic range out of the R6. And the RP also has a slightly better low light capability because you get less grain from a smaller sensor. So if you're a hobbyist and aren't shooting sports, because this is the one time and place that I say that the sports mode and shooting high frame rates, the R6 takes it, whereas shooting, it is almost impossible. It is so depressingly hard to shoot fast moving objects with the R. And I know that the RP is a low frame rate as well, and I haven't used that personally, but I would recommend going with the R6 if you're doing sports. And even considering sticking with a lower and cheaper DSLR with a mirror is going to be sometimes a better bang for your buck. So knowing when to be like, okay, hey, the extra $1,000 on top, I'm good, and just go with the 5D Mark IV to do sports, that might also be a wonderful option for you. And that one I'd say is probably the hardest one to balance right now that I've seen, because you do have a lot of great features with the R6, but it still is a lot of money for that specific camera. If you are a landscape photographer, this is one of the times when I say, man, like there's a lot of different cameras. The R is going to be good, the RP is going to be good, and then if you're really just a hobbyist, man, even the M series, so the M50 is going to be a good option for you. Just bring a tripod and throw it up on there. I know that a lot of people like to shoot everything, and I'd say that if you're just going to be an everything photographer as a hobbyist and you want a mirrorless full frame, the RP is the way to go. Why I recommend the cheaper cameras for those that are just doing the photography side is the lens matters so much more than the actual camera body. You're going to get very, very similar results from the RP, the R, and the Canon R6. This, and even, from the Canon R5, but when you take the different price points, you're not going to have as much budget for the lenses, and the lenses are what really give you the wonderful quality. One second. So investing in a good lens is what's really going to give you that boost rather than in quality. And the usability, for the most part, you can get almost the same functions out of all these cameras. Some things are easier to do than others with different cameras, but for the most part, the lenses go on all these cameras, and the lenses are what's really going to give you the awesome jump in quality, especially in low light. Even having the Canon R6, which is wonderful in low light, is still going to be a worse option in low light if you have an f4 lens than if you have a 1.8 lens on it, or a 2.8 RF with the 28 to 70. If you have that thing on the RP, that's probably going to be a much better low light photography setup than if you have the R6 with a f4 24 to 105. And if you are shooting in 4K all the time and you just want 4K, 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 the R6 probably won't be for you quite yet, because the 4K overheats. It's 30 minutes shooting, 10 minutes cool down, 10 minutes shooting, 10 minutes cool down, 10 minutes shooting, which isn't good for long form video. It might be a good secondary, but for the most part, if you want to shoot that, the R has wonderful 4K in it, and you can get 10-bit as well out of the R if you have an external recorder, which gives really awesome 4K quality. As well, I wouldn't recommend the R6 as a secondary shooter. So if you have, let's say, just the R5 and then you want a secondary, I wouldn't recommend the R6. I'd recommend something like the RP or the R. And that's because the price point, and because it is a secondary, it's like the last resort, but you're paying so much extra money to have a camera that's only getting a little bit of use out of it. Whereas you could take the money difference between the RP and the R6 and go buy yourself another lens that you can use with your primary in comparison. So I wouldn't say it's a great secondary unless you just have like all the money. So when would you actually buy the R6? If you're doing professional work, you're going to want those 2 card slots, and sometimes you just really do need those 2 card slots. Shooting with the R and backing it up on my phone was not a fun way to go. Having the 2 card slots and knowing gives you that wonderful peace of mind that you're not going to just lose everything from an event that you shot and put all this work into. Number 2, if you are pushing the limits of creativity with your content and you need that 1080p and 120 frames a second, and you're really, really pushing the edge of what you can do creatively, then the R6 is going to help you do that. If you're shooting sports, choosing the R6 is definitely the first mirrorless Canon camera that you can do this with, because the autofocus is amazing even in low light, and it just has that 20 frames a second that you just can't get out of in the R or the RP. Handheld low light needs, so the ibis inside the R6 is when the R6 in this case with the ibis just doesn't compare to the RP or the R and just blows it away for handheld and low light because of that ibis. And even lenses that are EF without the IS have awesome photos that you can get from them. Animal photography. Now this one is like, yeah, you can do it, and a lot of people do it with the R and the RP, but having that eye focus on animals from the R6 and the R5, like totally night and day, I assume, because I don't really shoot animals, but if you're gonna do that, and it's gonna give you that higher frame rate, so that if you're trying to catch that specific moment, and it's a lot easier with the R6, and that's when I'd recommend it in that case. So I know that most of this video feels like I've been bashing on the R6, but what I'm just saying is that a lot of you that are hobbyists will be better served by buying something like the RP and skipping out on some of the higher features in some of the higher models such as the R and the R6, simply because lenses matter a lot more than the camera body, and if you're not going to be shooting video, there's almost no point in buying the R. And that is one of the places where the R and the R6 and the R5 are, like, Canon is just awesome about creating lenses and cameras that work together to be dual function for video and photos. And that's really where these cameras shine, is they do both really well. No matter what you go with, you're going to probably be satisfied because they're all awesome cameras. But if there's one takeaway you have from this video, it's that the camera body doesn't mean everything, and some of you should probably be going with a lower budget body and a higher quality lens. Thank you for watching. My name is Daniel, and if you enjoyed this, don't forget to like and subscribe.